Broadcasting on Star Worldwide Networks. It's Two Small Biz Guys. And now, here are your hosts, Zen Benefiel and Ray Silverstein.
Boy, it sure is nice not having to introduce yourself. Hi, Ray.
Well, that's right, but how do we know who we are?
Well, I just said hi, Ray, so we know who you are.
Okay, hi, Zen.
I'm one of the advisorologists here with Two Small Biz Guys, Ray and Zen. We're here to caricaturize your day, and we're going to have a great discussion today. I really feel like this is one of the best topics we've picked so far, and it's the general theme is give your business a power check. And we're going to talk about a book called Escape Velocity. We're going to be referencing that by Geoffrey Moore. And I also got some things by Douglas Rushkoff.
You had trouble getting over that W.
I did.
Does W stand for wrong?
Why? It stands for W. It's like, well, we won't go into the Bush thing.
Okay. All right.
So, looking at the status quo in a business in order to establish a baseline and how you go from there. What's the matter with the status quo today?
Well, I think the question is, what is the matter with the status quo anytime, whether it be back in 1900s, 1800s, or whatever?
Well, you and I are both bow rockers, so the status quo kind of goes thrown out the window when we enter the room.
Well, but the aspect is, I went to a...
Right, Blade?
Right. I went to a workshop years ago, and it was very interesting. The fellow speaker said, you're in business to destroy your product or service, because if you don't destroy it, it means that competition will. And by destroying it means improving, having a better version of it, a faster model, getting better delivery.
Right. Well, it's like throwing a plant on the floor and poking holes in it purposely, because those are the answers you're going to need in order to move forward.
Right. So the aspect is that what you're starting to talk about is that with Mr. Moore in his book, he talks about when people start to do the early planning. Most businesses are like accountants, and they take last year's results and they start building off of last year's results.
They amortize from that.
And what his format is says, don't start with last year's results.
Toss it out.
Well, not necessarily toss it out, but he says, first of all, put it aside, because if you just look at last year's format, you're going to be building off of last year's format, so therefore you're building off of a known entity rather than thinking about the unknown.
And with the digital age, that's kind of senseless now.
Well, I don't know if it's senseless or not. I think it depends upon what your business is. For example, if
certainly going after the dollars.
Well, it's a
threw that one in there as a curve.
But the aspect is that it's a management style. It's not a leadership style.
Right.
Management basically takes and says, okay, we're going to manage the business. And a leadership style says, okay, we're going to move the business, we're going to take the business, we're going to create this vision, we're going to move forward. So when you look at last year's numbers and you're building off of last year's numbers, you're very much managing that, and you're not really thinking about the leadership. Stay in the
course, steady as she goes kind of attitude, right?
Right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
So if I was making buggy whips and Henry Ford came along and I would say, no, we're doing a great job, we make the best buggy whips ever. And Henry says, whoa, people don't need faster horses. They need my car.
Right.
My business in buggy whips is gone. And we have, as you point out, the digital age.
And you don't have to clean up after yourself.
Oh, just watch your step now. But as people say nowadays, you have the aspect where change is so much faster due to the digital period and due to computerization that...
And a biggie, globalization.
Globalization means that the world is a much bigger oyster than it used to be.
Right.
Before, we used to talk about, okay, who was competition in our country, in the U.S., per se.
Right. Now you can access from Singapore or Seattle. Doesn't really matter.
Right. So actually, back in the late 1990s, when they had the expansion of the communications, and basically that made the globalization where all of a sudden now information and communication and it could be communicated faster from India than maybe from, say, next door. So all of a sudden, globalization means you're not separated by time.
And with the little light packets going down that glass tube,
right,
it just magnifies the capacity for doing so.
Yeah, so you're not separated by time and space. You're only separated by how fast something gets you.
Well, I don't know about the space thing. We have
you're being spacey, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
So with Cisco CEO John Chambers, he says, market transitions wait for no one. This is kind of what you're talking about. You've got to be looking at where you want to go, not where you've been.
Right. So when you go through, if you do your strategic analysis format and you talk about the SWOT analysis, and you're into the tail end of it, the opportunities and threats, you're trying to think about, okay, what is going out in the world that's going to impact our business? What is going to replace us? What is going to replace our product or service?
But that's traditionally an inside view of how we're going to react to that within the company, rather than looking at as Geoffrey puts forth, taking an outside-in view.
Well, but when you look what's going on outside, then you might have to say, okay, what do we have to do inside?
Right.
And maybe
that's ultimately where it leads you, because you've got to manage the change that's necessary to meet the outside demands.
So maybe the change might be
loose,
deleting a product, saying goodbye to a product. There's a famous story about Intel when they were getting started. They were very big. I'm not that much of a techie, but they're very big on one side of the business. And they were sitting down and talking about should they make this big investment in one side of the business. And they said, well, if we were starting from scratch, where would we put the money? And they'd put the money into the other side of the business, which basically where they grew by leaps and bounds. So if they looked at their past history, they would say, "Oh, we ought to put the money over in this side, not into the semiconductor side."
Well, maybe it's leaning towards more herstory now, like with IBM and their female president. Of course, they're in China, but maybe that's something that we need to look at too, because the feminine aspect in business is growing by leaps and bounds as well, which I think is also fueling this change from the
well, I know you're touchy-feely. That's why you want to talk about the females.
Yeah, you ought to see my fingers moving around right now. Okay. The voice stops and the fingers start moving.
Well, but okay, but what
talk with the hands? You can't hear it.
Yeah, but what that does is I think when you have a gender issue, and not gender issue, but when you have more females, you have a different perspective.
It's an me, not an issue.
But you have a different perspective as to how to do business and how to go into business and what the markets are.
Right.
So, because I find in the advisory groups I do, that the women have a different viewpoint and they have a different means of communication and discussion than the men do. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. The men generally want to get to a solution very quickly.
Problem solution.
And the women really want to kind of talk around it, about it. What are the issues impacting it, affecting it? So it's a far more, I'll call it, maybe not idealistic, but it's a more probing type of format.
Well, I think it fits with the globalization idea, because women tend to globalize things where men compartmentalize.
Okay, but the aspect as we're talking about is that in business today,
a little too deep there.
Do you start off with your you take your financial statements and say, okay, this is what we did last year. Here's where we put so much money into XYZ product. Are we going to put so much money in it this year? Are we expecting our sales to increase by this area? So the premise here is that, okay, we have to think about where is a big potential for us, and what is the lifespan of our existing products. Should we invest more in our existing products, or we should kind of say goodbye? Should we put them into a milk machine and start milking them instead of really investing in them?
Well, that's where it's cyclical. That's the growth of business being cyclical that happens by what you already have, not what you're innovating.
Right. But the aspect is it's easier from a management point of view to say, okay, this is what we did, this is what we should do, rather than taking a leap of faith.
Well, and for large companies, there's so much momentum created by that kind of philosophy that if the ship needs redirections, it's almost impossible to do so.
Well, but we're talking about small business, and small business it becomes a question of risk and how much venture capital money they have.
True. So, from his standpoint, who are becoming the new reference competitors? How do they stack up against the norms that are being set in the marketplace? What kind of question is that to ask of small business?
Well, he's starting to talk about the question always is what is our market position? Because he talks about market power, which is the market power by really the category. What is a category business that we're in, and what is the growth? So the premise is, the old story is you want to hitch your wagon to the strongest horses. So if the strongest horses are, we'll say, like Apple when the phone is coming out, we want to hitch our wagon to that marketplace, because whether we're good or bad, we're going to go along with it.
Hitch it to the star. So a key point: how do you create and accept new concepts, new ideas that take time, money, and resources from current successful products or services? We'll talk about that in just a moment when we come back. Thanks for listening.
Two Small Biz Guys with Zen and Ray. We'll be back after this.
The digital world is vast. Is it working for you? Would you like some qualified help? Zen Benefiel is a wonder with social media who leads focused and organized workshops on multiple platforms like Facebook, Google+, and LinkedIn. He leads by example, not theory, and teaches you how to live large and lively on the web. From blogs to SEO, his web presence speaks for itself. Take advantage of his expertise. Visit BeTheDream.com and click on Web Wizardry. Hire him while you can.
Business owners want to call their own shots, make appropriate income, and control their destiny. Our passion is to help you achieve your goals. A Pro Peer Advisory Board is just the thing. It's a confidential monthly meeting of non-competitive owners facilitated by a pro who has walked in your shoes. He's your mentor and tormentor, moving you ahead. When you have issues or opportunities keeping you awake, where do you get help? Pro Boards give support and non-biased feedback from your peers. To sample a free Pro President's Board meeting, email ray@propres.com. There's no commitment or charge. Email ray@propres.com. You're listening to Two Small Biz Guys. Now, back to your hosts, Zen Benefiel and Ray Silverstein.
All right, we're back with you, Two Small Biz Guys, your advisorologist, Ray and Zen, just kind of sharing some pertinent things with you today that we know you're going to enjoy and really get a lot out of. So we were talking about the key points of accepting new concepts, ideas that take time, money and resources from current successful products or services that kind of lead into the hierarchy of powers. And Geoffrey delineates 5 different areas: category power, company power, market power, offer power, and execution power. So let's talk about those items, Ray, and see if we can break that down a little bit so it's easier to understand and becomes applicable for our small business guys.
Yeah, but let's just talk about some of these powers. The biggest one is really the category power. And
okay, why so?
Because if you're in a dying category, again going back to the buggy whip situation,
right?
And in buggy whips is a category which is going downhill, it's shrinking.
Pocket PCs.
So therefore, or whatever it might be, the aspect is you can put all the money, energy, and emphasis into that category, and you're not going to really have any impact. So you want to pick out categories that you think are going to grow at least 15-20% a year more. If you get a category or what you do is you kind of look at your current business categories and you say, our business consists of maybe 4 or 5 different items. We're probably maybe in 2 or 3 different categories. When I used to be in the manufacturing business, we would look at our categories. We manufacture mechanics tools, so the tools were one category. We manufacture electrical connectors. That was
you've got hand, you've got machine . You've got all kinds of
Well, but hand tools are just one category,
right?
And then electrical connectors are another category. So the aspect is you say, where are we in each one of these categories? Where do we have impact? Which category is growing faster? Which category has a better profit potential? Which category do we have a better recognition in? Because if you are a no-name, it's very hard to climb up that hill.
And that answers one of Geoffrey's questions. What category is your growth contributing to in your overall growth objectives? So that's one of the things that you've got to identify.
Well, that also goes back to, let's say you have 2 categories of equal strength, just picking a hypothetical. And
that often happens within companies.
Okay, so, but again, we're back in small companies. But
right.
But the aspect is, so one category you have some recognition, people know who you are, and the other category you're a no-name. So where do you put your emphasis? You say, okay, we got two categories of equal strength. We're going to put our emphasis in the one where we have some name because we have more of a crown jewel. We have more of an impact that we can create. Now, if we have a third category that is really not major, it's a brand new, again, hypothetical, it's a brand new area that's coming out. Do we want to put our emphasis there where we can be the market leader?
Well, according to Jeff, yeah, you do.
Well, that takes guts. It depends how much.
It does.
It depends how much money you have, because if you go
guts,
out
no
there.
glory.
So,
you just don't want your guts spewing all over the place.
So the aspect is that he presents a very
that would be a market explosion.
Market explosion. Right? So if you got the business, it'd be a real blast.
Yeah,
How's
sure
that?
would.
Oh, and you say blast off.
Right.
But the aspect is that if you don't have a lot of capital to back you up, what is your ability to stay in there, and how much are you really willing to risk to take on that?
Yeah, what's your staying power?
So he talks about all these from a theoretical point of view that everything is kind of equal, but in a small business you may not have the resources, not only money, maybe you don't have the technical skills to develop it. So it becomes a question: how easy is it for you to move within that category? But again, going back.
Or what collaborators or suppliers, vendors, whatnot, are available that have that you can access and create a partnership or an alliance with.
Possible. If you really are a good salesperson, you bring a good, strong program. I mean, you might even go out there and get venture capital money. One never knows. But the aspect is that all of a sudden,
maybe two do, one doesn't.
Well, two, that's maybe three, but then comes the question: does the owner want to give up equity? Sometimes they say I can get money I want to control it all.
Good examples of that. The Shark Tank shows that there's a struggle for how much equity are we really willing as owners to give up.
Yeah. Well, the premise is 100% of something more than, say, 60% of something greater. And so on the Shark Tank, when they go there, they're giving
would
up
seem
equity.
to be an obvious answer there.
Well, it depends what the greater is. If the greater is, in other words, 100% of $1,000 is $1,000. 60% of, we'll say, $1,500 is $900. So I'm still $100 short in that example.
Right.
So it depends upon what the greater is. And so the person has to say, what is the leverage factor to get something even greater? But again, going back, the category is what really pulls you. If you're in that marketplace and that category grows, you will grow with it, even if you don't do things well. But you may not grow as fast as the leader does, but you will grow.
But you're
with
still
it.
going to grow, and that's your objective.
Right. So it's like a rising tide raises all boats.
Right.
So you're trying to find out, okay, which has a rising tide.
And it doesn't matter what your displacement is, you're going to go.
You're going to go.
So let's move on to a little bit about market power and what that means.
Well, let's back up to company power first.
Okay, let's go to company power.
Because before you have market power, you have to have company power. And basically, in the company power aspect, you say, okay, what are the crown jewels of the company?
And do our innovations focus on leveraging our crown jewels, or are we spreading ourselves too thin?
Okay, well, the question is, what are the crown jewels? And really, when you go to companies, they really don't always, they say, well, what is our crown jewel?
We got to figure out the semantics on that one.
Yeah. So when you go back to your Shark Tank example,
right.
One of the things people say, well, we have a patent. Okay, well, patent.
So what?
Well, patent could be a crown jewel, depending if the patent really covers something.
Right.
And if you have the money to defend it. But that's a crown jewel. If a person has maybe the leading researcher in some type of technology, that's a crown jewel if you can tie them into the business. If you have the strategic alliance that you referred to with certain players who can move you forward, that would be a crown jewel.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of crown jewels somewhere.
And there seems to be a lot more of that in the digital age, in the new millennium specifically, on a variety of fronts because of the increase in the small business ownership. The 28 million, according to Forbes, you got 28 million businesses in this country alone, and 22 million of them have one employee. Well, one person in charge, and
you had it right with one employee.
Okay, so let's say you have two people. That's still, with the amount of effort and work that needs to be done in order to grow a business, it's almost impossible without strategic alliances.
Well, you may need strategic alliances, or maybe a lot of these people today. But you're also talking about today is the aspect. There's a lot of independent contractors. So a lot of smaller businesses don't necessarily have employees; they have independent contractors.
Right, but according to labor law, they're now employees.
Well, it depends. Well, let's not get
on how many hours. Okay, right. That's another discussion.
That's another whole topic by itself. I see you brought a bag of worms with you.
I did.
Oh,
and the cans in the other pocket.
Are you going to go fishing now?
You're right.
But the aspect
I'm going to throw a line out here.
Okay, but one of the concerns is a small company, they have a crown jewel, but technology may change very quickly, where maybe it's no longer that glorious.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that because of the speed of change, question is what is really a major crown jewel to a company? So the company power, it really is a position as to how much they can make an impact by bringing that product to market. Do they have the right contacts? Do they have, are they able to get in? Again, going back to your strategic, that's hard to say.
Hey, no, I thought I was the only one that could do that.
so they have this trouble with
age does have its virtues.
Yes, right. Darn, I should hope it has to have something else. It has numbers besides a virtue, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. So, okay, so let's move on to market power. Is the market segment big enough to matter, yet small enough to win decisively, as a company's looking at that?
Okay, well, market power is within a category. It's interesting, with a lot of these things we're talking about, go back to a study which was maybe 40 years ago, called PIMS, which is an acronym for Profit Improvement
Management System?
It might be that.
Okay.
But the PIMS study was basically fostered by General Electric with Harvard Business School. And General Electric said, we have Company A over here, which is doing very well.
Business and education partnering even back then.
Yeah, right. So they moved management from Company A over to Company B, and they thought Company B was going to do well. And Company B did do so well. So the question came up, why is this? So they went through a study, and they said, what is the number one criteria for companies to be successful? And the number one criteria was market share. So when you talk about market power, market share is really the key for market power. And so GE said, if we don't have more than 10% of any market share, we're getting rid of that company. And they sold off a lot of businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So the aspect,
and a lot of people had to turn into entrepreneurs because of that.
Yeah, but the aspect is, if you don't have generally over 10% of a market share, now it depends on what you want to define as your market. First of all, you don't get your pricing. You have a hard time of getting a product in. So it becomes this issue. You have this issue of market share being a very critical aspect as how you define what you want to accomplish and who your market is.
Okay, so that's pretty clear as mud for some people.
I'm glad we clarified that.
Right. So it actually is pretty clear in being able to determine where things are going, how to assess, and the tools that are available to do that. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with you, and we'll continue our discussion with Ray and Zen, your advisorologist with Two Small Biz Guys. Thanks for listening.
Two Small Biz Guys with Zen and Ray. We'll be back after this. As a business owner, have you ever felt alone at the top? You don't have to be. Ray Silverstein has worked with many business owners for over 20 years facilitating peer advisory boards. He is the proverbial mentor and tormentor. A Pro President's Peer Advisory Board is a confidential monthly meeting of non-competitive owners that give support, feedback, and knowledge. They know the adage, all of us are smarter than one of us. He has walked in your shoes, having owned and sold 2 companies with sales in excess of $60 million and approximately 1,300 employees. In Young President's organization, he participated in peer advisory boards and felt it was a key to his success. His passion is to help small business owners succeed. He knows peer boards work when you are open, don't feel like you know it all, are willing to put issues on the table, and willing to take criticism. Be his guest at a Pro Advisory Board meeting to see if it works for you. There's no commitment to join, and you'll have a great experience. To sample a free Pro Business Owner Peer Board, email ray@propres.com. That's ray@propres.com. There's no commitment or charge.
Are you a small business owner looking for education and information and don't have time for school? Is there an area of your business you'd like to know more about but aren't sure where to go or who to ask? Practical Biz U is an online repository of small business courses now available to you on the web. There are single class options, bundles for specific areas, and monthly memberships for ongoing learning opportunities. Go to practicalbizu.com and sign up today.
You're listening to Two Small Biz Guys. Now, back to your hosts, Zen Benefiel and Ray Silverstein.
All right, welcome back to Two Small Biz Guys with Ray and Zen. We're talking about Geoffrey Moore's article, Escape Velocity. And I want to say that this also, Ray's written up some really great cliff notes or crib notes, whatever you want to call them, and we have those available on the website. That's twosmallbizguys.com.
That's the number 2.
Right, it's a numeral 2. And, young guy. It's on the right side of the page. Just plug your name and email in, and you'll be able to download that article immediately. It's actually 8 pages, so it's fairly extensive, and it's got some great information in it, and synthesized from the book, of course.
And a few typos, too.
It does. Now, there's also a guy named Douglas Rushkoff that wrote a book recently, and there was an interview that I just read with him. The book's called Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus, and he thinks that all of this is an effort to edify the old industrial age mentality. We'll get back to that. First, we're going to get back to we're going to continue with the categories. Ray's shaking his head. He's like, where are you going to take me now?
Well, you just got me lost on the bus. I mean, we took a detour.
No, it's a Google bus. You're not lost on it. You're just a passenger.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to drive the bus back to talking about the kinds of power that Geoffrey mentions in his article. And the next one we were looking at was we were talking about company power, crown jewels and things like that. Then we're looking at market power. We talked a little bit about that. So do you have a clear line of sight to growth opportunities in adjacent market segments is one of the questions.
Well, let's go back to the market power. One of the aspects of market power.
I just did.
Okay, very good. It was over my head, but we'll bring it down back.
At least we're not underwater.
That's right. One of the aspects is, what is word of mouth? How much word of mouth do you have for your product or service?
I got a lot of words coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, we know.
Okay.
But it's what other people are saying. So the criteria is, if you have testimonials, if you have people who are speaking about you positively, and therefore you have strong word of mouth, that means that you have a stronger market power. So the key in business is, how do you create the trust of the consumer, your customer?
That leads into some folks that I know, Tom and Penny Powers, who started eCademy years ago, and they have 4 principles with the social media side of the business, which is really what the drivers are now. It goes way beyond the industrial age and works more to social currency. And those 4 items are know, like, follow, and trust.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 5th. That's share.
Okay.
So when you find someone that you like the material, you begin to share it. You talk to others about it. The word of mouth happens naturally. Only this time, instead of just the word of mouth, it's kind of the word by click, where you're sharing through the various social organizations.
Okay, but word by click is the same thing as word of mouth.
It is.
It's a digital thing, so you got to use your finger. But the aspect is, what you want to do is you want to give your people that you like, you want to give them the finger by clicking for information or passing it along to others. So the aspect is,
we're just shifting all kinds of semantics around now.
Yes.
Understanding whole new paradigms exist in the new millennium. We're just sharing a few.
So the aspect is that when you have market power, people relate to you, people trust you, people brag about you, they participate you. For example, again, going back
They
to
celebrate you.
They celebrate you. So when I like the peer review groups I do, I have most of my members or new members come from someone else in the group and say, gee, you ought to participate. This is something I do. So there is a word of mouth type of activity.
Well, and with your activities with the peer group or peer advisory groups, even though we're on the first page of Google when you plug that term in, there still has to be.
We're not going to brag about that.
No, we're not. So there's still the aspect of, I'm starting to pick up on you now, the aspect of the word of mouth that is most important because it's what someone has gained from the experience with the group that's going to move it forward in the recommendation area.
Right.
The know, like, share, and follow, and all those things.
Okay, but the other, again, you started raising some questions also. And some of the questions,
I am a question.
I know, but some of the questions if in your business you might want to ask is a market segment that we're talking about big enough yet small enough for us to win deliberately? In other words, if we're in a huge marketplace and we're a small fish, does it really help us? In a small business, you really want to be a big fish in a small pond because you have to have a following, you have to have people who think that you're really making an impact.
So then you have to really be innovative, create something that is desirable, useful, and you have that market niche cornered.
Well, I don't know about cornered, but you want to have an impact.
Well, if you're the big fish in the small pond.
Well, okay. But
now there's the flip side of it with the small fish in the big pond that's bent on escalating their growth through applying this new philosophy that Rushkoff presents in making things valuable rather than just profitable.
Well, okay, the question with that is, what is the difference when he says valuable? What is the word?
In the industrial age,
what does valuable mean?
That it benefits life, others, not just personal gain, but from a monetary standpoint, but from a living standpoint. Now, there's a lot of things in the new millennium that are moving towards that because we're recognizing that green business is good business, for instance, that personal growth business is booning because everybody's looking for the next guru or some help in getting their life together because the chaos and the change from the old millennium to the new millennium and having the economy totally ripped asunder by the new digital marketplace.
Well, first of all, we're going off in a different area because I don't fully believe that the new millennium or the new marketplace is that much different because you have to go back to the basic philosophy. Before you had the printing press.
Well, that's where Rushkoff says the basic philosophy for the new millennium is flawed because it's still based on the industrial age, not the digital age.
Well, the question is
where that's going to go is still questionable.
No, I have a fellow in one of my groups who is very, very big on trying to create a new economic theory, and he's going to people at Northwestern and MIT, major economists, talking about that the old historic business curves are really flawed because they're not talking about the digital age. Mm-hmm. So far, he hasn't. He has people saying this is of interest, but no one has really bought into.
Well, and the big thing with the digital age is the term called social currency, and it's been floating about for a few years. But like anything else, it's going to take time for that really to evolve and emerge in some kind of frame that shows that it's actually
but I think social currency is basically like word of mouth, only it has far greater impact because you can get the message out to so many people faster and more frequent.
And that brings it back. That brings us back to offer power.
It brings you back to offer power, and it brings you back to company power as to how strong in the market and what is your position. Mm-hmm. But offer power, which is really if you make an offer, what is the probability that someone is going to really buy into it and accept it and really want to run with it?
Right. And there's some other pertinent questions there, like what can we do to amplify its differentiation further, it's being the product or the service. What are we wasting? Are we wasting major resources in the minor sense, or are we chasing our competitor's tail rather than just doing our own thing?
Yeah, but the offer power I think is more of in a marketing type of area rather than a strategic. I mean, everything is strategic.
Well, it's all about the offer.
Yeah,
and how it's received as far as whether it's going to be accepted and capitalized on.
Right. So it's kind of going down this hierarchy.
Transactions.
Yeah, I think it's quite a ways down the hierarchy, because you have to have a product which has a demand what people think.
Is there a lower hierarchy?
There's a hierarchy and a low. No, it's a lower hierarchy. Yeah, I think it's in Ohio.
We have a hierarchy, and then we must have a lower hierarchy.
But there's also molarchy too.
Yeah, and we're playing around with that. And then we have jobbarchy.
Jobbarchy.
Yeah, that's where the job's the boss and everybody wins.
Okay. Well, there's a study on that. There's the study with Zappos and their management style. You're finding out that there's a lot of difficulty where supposedly everybody wins. So,
which will get us into the execution power as we come back after the break. Thanks for listening to Two Small Biz Guys. This is Ray and Zen. We'll be right back with you.
That's a killing topic.
Two Small Biz Guys with Zen and Ray. We'll be back after this.
Hi, I'm Zen Benefiel with Be the Dream Transformational Life Coaching and Professional Services at BeTheDream.com. Our mission? To provide leading-edge transformational personal and business development services. Our services include life coaching, enterprise coaching, partnering facilitations, and possibilities coagulating. We've been in business since 1988. In times of massive change, you need someone who can help you adjust and transform. I can meet that challenge with you, offering a stellar skill set from serving individuals and companies for over 20 years. I invite you to peruse BeTheDream.com and put me to the test. Fill out the coaching assessment survey and give me a call. The first call is free, and you can find out if I'm what you are looking for in a coach, consultant, or service provider. Call 480-633-7179. Let your dreams mold future realities. BeTheDream.com.
Business owners want to call their own shots, make appropriate income, and control their destiny. Our passion is to help you achieve your goals. A Pro Peer Advisory Board is just the thing. It's a confidential monthly meeting of non-competitive owners facilitated by a pro who has walked in your shoes. He's your mentor and tormentor, moving you ahead. When you have issues or opportunities keeping you awake, where do you get help? Pro Boards give support and non-biased feedback from your peers. To sample a free Pro President's Board meeting, email ray@propres.com. There's no commitment or charge. Email ray@propres.com. You're listening to Two Small Biz Guys. Now, back to your hosts, Zen Benefiel and Ray Silverstein.
Alrighty then, welcome back to Two Small Biz Guys. We're talking about Jeff Moore's article or book. It's called
Escape Velocity.
All right, I'm glad I got the feedback. And, of course, we ended on a very dead note.
No. We were talking about this.
Dead air. We were talking about execution.
Because this portion of the program is going to be a killer, that's why.
Right. Okay, great.
I'm all choked up about it, though.
I'm just dying to live. So execution power is the ability to outperform your competitive set under conditions that favor no vendor in particular.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Well, the aspect here is that what is execution in a business? And
talk to Larry Bossity about that.
Yeah, well, I have a book review on that one too.
Right.
Notes. But the aspect is that on execution, is it the question of performing more efficiently, more effectively? In Mr. Moore and his format is execution is also the ability to create the new product, the new whiz-bang, understanding what the demands are. So it's not just a very definitive area. It's also a very subjective area.
Right. Well, and he gets into saying, what does it take to execute escape velocity strategy? And he presents basically three things. You must innovate sufficiently to achieve competitive separation.
Okay, let's take that one right there.
All right.
I mean, that takes a huge amount of skill, or maybe luck, of having the insight to see what is coming down the road.
Well, the new discoveries kind of happen because you've got the skill set. You know where you're going. You've applied. I forget who it was that said something. When you create the momentum, when you decide, you make a choice, and you move towards something, the universe supports it. So it's going to throw in all kinds of different, tasty tidbits along the way. It's up to you to perceive and pick them up.
Well, but the aspect is, if you go back and you say, is it really if you were to do a focus group,
right?
Does a focus group or does the public really know what the new item is going to be? I mean, there's a famous quote by Henry Ford, and I'll kind of paraphrase it. He said, if I went out and asked the public, should I build this car? And they say, no, we need a faster horse. So the aspect is the public isn't always aware of what's coming down the road. The public doesn't have that insight because, first of all, it's a question of change, and change is uncomfortable. So therefore, there has to be this individual who has this ability to see beyond the comfort zone and see these unique...
And to ask questions about the future rather than the current.
Correct. Okay. Right. So that's your first aspect. So that takes a very unique type of execution type of capability.
So the second one is you must institutionalize, I have papers, the activities that underlie that separation so that it can be scaled and sustained. Now, the first domain was of invention. This one is of deployment.
This is really a process format. How do I create the process?
Everything's a process.
Well, okay, I'll agree with that.
Oh, good.
Okay,
we have some agreement.
Yeah. It's not a question whether it's a good or bad process.
That's two small biz guys agreeing on something.
Yes.
All right. So, what do you do to institutionalize the activities?
Well, first of all, you have to have the resources. The resources being money and manpower, or brain power in this case, because
right.
it may not be employees, it may be the skill sets, it may be the strategic alliance.
And you got to manage the water cooler.
And you have to manage the water cooler, but you have to have the ability, or you have to have the monies to be able to hang in there long enough to develop the item. So now that's one side of things. The other side is the people side. How you get them stirred up to live the vision and the mission that's either been created by the owner of the company or as a collaboration with the owners and staff, which is kind of the trend lately, is to pull the entire organization, say, okay, here's where we are, where do you want to go, how can you help us get there? Right. I agree that you need the manpower and you need the capability, so it becomes also, even when you pull the people, mm-hmm. The aspect is you have to have some type of game plan. Depends on whether you're vaulting or not. Yeah, because you all can't be going. That's right. Because you want to vault up to a higher level. But right. The aspect is you want to have people who are working together towards a common achievement, or at least down on a roadmap towards success, rather than everybody going in different ways. Well, that's the interesting thing that I've found, or one of the interesting things is that, we talk about common sense. It's not common. You have to make sense common. And with these efforts of institutionalizing, for instance, in this respect, that's one of the things that make sense common. And everybody can find their way in that because there's not an assumption. Common sense is often assumed. Well, the question also is that you get involved in the discussion as to common sense. It becomes a question of the antecedent, what's the action that causes the common sense, and what is the output or the consequence. So you have to, in these organizations, you have to have some type of output mm-hmm. that is coming from these activities, and these people have to work in some direction towards that. Right, yeah. Right. So one of the third thing is you must drive the transition from invention to deployment to a tipping point such that the world will go forward as newly aligned and not fall back into its old ways. Okay. Well, they talk a lot about, there was books in the past several years ago about the tipping point. Right. Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell, right, was the first one really, I think, kind of talked about it. But the aspect is, how do you create the tipping point? Is you create the tipping point, as we talked about before, by having word of mouth or the digital
mechanism
to get the information out there.
Right.
And you also have
the data stream.
And you also have to have people who have the same passion for the concept that you're promoting, who are the early adapters, who also are willing to go out and spread the gospel. And then you
can I have a witness?
And then hopefully, raise your right hand. Right. So I will buy this product. But so you have to get this gospel, and you have to get the people on board to really move it forward. So the execution that's in the development of the product or service. But then there's also the more the mundane execution of being able to service the parties who have an interest, getting them the information, whether it be instructional information or whether it be how to use it, or even getting the product, if it's a product, off the shelf to them.
Now, here's a great question. We need to get this one in.
I can't wait to hear this question. It's so great.
Do we have the right kinds of leaders in charge?
That question is so outstanding. I'm not going to answer that one. That's a very
because we were talking earlier about leadership management. This phase, the execution, happens through leadership.
No, the execution is the execution.
Hey, now wait a minute.
The execution of the creation of the concept is leadership. The execution of the implementation of that concept is management.
Right. So given the execution discipline that's required, how does that transfer into the power statement?
Well, it comes back to the aspect that there's two different forms of execution here. One is the creation of the idea. The other is the implementation of the idea. And it's also very interesting when a lot of venture capital people go out and they talk to the creator of the idea. They are reluctant to want to make the investment until they say, okay, who is going to manage this? Because otherwise, they're off in never land because they're basically innovators, they're creators.
Right.
And they don't necessarily know how to bring this.
So they don't look at what lines of business are in transition, either from invention to deployment or from deployment to optimization. So that's another aspect of it, is being able to optimize what processes
so it means within
are in place.
Yeah, so within this little short life cycle of a business, you have different forms of execution as you go along. One is the execution skills to create it. Another is the execution skill to be able to bring others in, either strategic alliance or investors or whatever, or to hire the right people at the early stage. Then you need the execution skills to be able to create the product and get it onto the shelf or out to the public in some fashion. And then you need the execution stage, a skill again, to say, is this product really right? Is our manpower really right for where we are? Do we have to make changes in both the organization and or our product? Because maybe the life cycle of products today is a lot shorter than what it ever used to be.
It is, and that's one of the final questions is, with respect to the transition programs, do we have clear milestones and metrics and visibility to ensure we know when they have reached their tipping points?
Well, the question is, when it reaches the tipping point, then what do you do? Then it requires a different execution stage.
Well, how do we tell we've reached the tipping point?
Well, I think you have to define what is the tipping point, because normally a tipping point, I would think, would be a question of what is your capacity.
Just like a salesman, answer a question with a question.
Well, no, it's a Jewish point of view. You always answer, so how do you feel? So how should I feel? So
that's why all the discussions are great.
That's right.
Okay.
So why should the discussion be so good? I mean,
yeah.
So but the aspect here is that I forgot my point now, but but you asked about the tipping point.
I did. How do we tell the tipping point?
I would think the tipping point is when it really requires, where the marketplace is really wanting to accept it in a large demand, a large way. Then the question is,
or even just an escalation of business.
Yeah, but the aspect is, how do you take care of that? So I use the old example. You go to a restaurant that has 4 waiters and needs 5. Pretty soon they only need 3. So if you can't take care of the demand, what you do is you kill the golden goose.
Right. So, with that, we're going to share another golden goose with you, and that's Two Small Biz Guys website, along with practicalbizu.com. There's a link on the website. please go to the website and download the Cliff Notes of the article we've been talking about today, written by Geoffrey Moore. It's called Escape Velocity, and you will gain from the experience. We almost guarantee it. And with that, we thank you for listening to this edition of Two Small Biz Guys with Ray and Zen, and we'll be back with you.
Thank you for listening to Two Small Biz Guys with Zen Benefiel and Ray Silverstein. You can hear Two Small Biz Guys live every Wednesday at noon or catch their show on demand anytime 24/7 right here on StarWorldWideNetworks.com.